Hey everyone, my name's Dan Pontefract. I am the antithesis of my last name, which means broken bridge. I'm trying to build bridges between people and organizations.
You see, I just thought cake. It's
Wow,
Pontefract cake.
cakes.
It's not a cake.
Good gosh, look, I have, look at this. See, I've got the old tins
Yeah.
of Dunhill's Pontefract cakes.
You know what? I couldn't tell you what is in a Pontefract cake.
Oh, the most glorious black licorice possible from the great county of York in Pontefract. That's where they originate. So, yes. Also, a ruinous castle in my name that I am 11th in line to, but without any rooms left. It is what it is. Pontefract Castle there.
And when did it get destroyed? In the Civil War?
The uncivil war of, I think, 1300s, the 1400s, okay. a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. The Romans and the Normans didn't like each other. So they went and started burning bridges to sort of prevent the Romans from coming in, and hence Broken Bridge, Pontefract, ergo got the name. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
Yes. I call myself a leadership strategist, which is a way to say, I spent my entire life, I think, thinking, Dom, about people and organizations. And within that, it's sort of how we lead ourselves, how we lead our teams, how we lead the organization. And there's lots of good things going on, but then there's things that annoy me. And I sort of help organizations and other leaders strategize what they might fix with what it is that they're doing. And
I think this, I was looking at your bio and I thought this seemed like the most surreal thing in the world, that you were an envisioner, but you work for a telecommunications company, which my experience of telecommunications companies is that the fact that they would even think about it seems hysterical. But that, because most of them are, that sort of, certainly in the UK and in Australia, which is really my experience, is that sort of national monopoly. So what, chief envisioner, what did you do for them?
What the hell is that? It's like when Disney calls their engineers Imagineers. What the hell is an Imagineer, right? Yeah, we made up a word just like Disney. And quite frankly, it was a word not meant to be an internal word. So there was no envisioning going on inside the organization per se. Although I did that in the previous role, I'll get to that. But a chief envisioner, what I decided to do was, after doing culture change and a bunch of great sort of leadership changes from the culture perspective at TELUS, which is kind of like, for those that are unaware, it's kind of like somewhere between a BT, a Vodafone, a Telstra. And I sort of plucked some really high performing team members from across the organization. I said, hey, why don't we go help other organizations with their own culture, leadership, et cetera, issues? And we can help them envision a different way in which that they might operate their organizations. And so I did that for about 5 years or so, and then went on my own.
That sounds loads of fun. Find some smart people, go work with some other people. That sounds great fun.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm still on a retainer with said organization, TELUS, so I still have a great soft and love heart spot for the people at TELUS. But yeah, that was a great ride for 10 years full time, 5 years as its chief learning officer and 5 years as its chief envisioner. A lot of great things we got to do with a lot of great people.
And what are some of the projects that, you pluck these people who are sort of working up the corporate ladder and you take them off and create some sort of virtual consulting team? What sort of projects were you doing for other people?
Public sector, private sector come to us, or we'd pitch them either way and say, hey, do you really understand what's going right and wrong inside your organization when it comes to things like collaboration or your technology platforms or your performance enhancement programs or your leadership development, learning development? And, they kind of look at us like, yeah, not really, no. I said, well, how about we spend 3 to 6 months helping you by interviewing, assessing, going through the organizational ways in which that you do culture, and tell you how you're doing, and give you kind of a scorecard. And then if we have any opportunities there, we see that you might want to fix, change, enhance, then that's part of the gig too. So we do a lot of those assessments, which were a lot of fun and enlightening. And I got to learn a lot about culture that way as well from other organizations. But then they'd sometimes, without the assessment or because of it, we would help them with some of the organizational culture dynamic leadership changes that they might need. So they might need a leadership model. Like, what does that mean? New values, attributes, behaviors. They might need help with how to become less fiefdom and siloing. So how do you collaborate as an organization better, more effectively across continents or time zones or even in the same building? So kind of myriad different ways, Don, but that allowed us that chance to actually be culture change agents, you might call it.
So are you charging for this?
Great question.
Or was you only doing it for clients?
So I would call, first of all, the exercise was called TELUS Transformation Office, TTO. We gave birth to that around 2013, and it lasted for about 5 years until I decided to say go at my own. And what we did was we would hook up with enterprise account executives and we'd sort of tag along. And so they might be selling IT services, telecom, whatever. And we were like, hey, how about we help them maybe understand if they want some culture enhancement help? And the enterprise account execs who were smart and savvy, they're like, oh, yeah, come along. So, we'd go along.
Because this will be a much more interesting conversation than the one I'm normally having.
Yes, that's exactly it. It was diversified 101, right? Or word of mouth, people would hear of me and books and speaking or whatever I was up to. And they're like, knock on the old TELUS door and say, hey, could we have Dan or his team come in and sort of help us understand what they do and what's the TELUS story, which was also, I should say, and a toot of the horn to TELUS, the culture change that really started around 2006 was a place in which that the CEO, Darren Entwistle, and the senior leadership team were like, we want to help and fix our culture. And we all of us did a really good job. It became a really good story. So people would hear about that culture change story and they'd want to hear about that too. Like, oh, can we do that? So that's part of the reason they're done.
Uh-huh. And were you charging them?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't answer that. Yes and no.
Okay, so, depends.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have a $20 million client for a telecom and you sort of say, well, we could charge you $100,000 for an assessment, or, we're going to do this for you because you're a $20 million client. That's times in which you kind of look and say, well, you know what? It's a sunk cost because really it's just human capital costs of the TELUS Transformation Office people who are within my sort of troubadour outfit.
Uh-huh.
Or there are times where like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we should charge. So
yeah,
you sort of two fingers in the wind and sometimes you just make decisions that way.
Well, and also if you've plucked people to come and work in your troubadour outfit, then, if they work for free, or the alternative is you'd be paying somebody to develop them, and they're getting this huge developmental opportunity. I know when I was at Rackspace, we used to take part in something called the Unisys Management Today Service Excellence Awards. And the reason that Unisys used to sponsor that award was because their senior managers were judges of the award program. And the CEO used to say, we get way more out of this than any of you, like the return on investment is huge because this is our innovation pool, and so, you're saying the same thing. You go out and you go, oh, look what they're doing. Oh, we're fixing a problem, but that's a thing we could do internally.
It's a really good point. Two of the great stories. First, a graduate, if you will, of the TELUS Transformation Office is now the director of the TELUS Sales Academy, this magnificently large academy that looks after all the development of VPs, directors, managers, and all the account executives. And the things that Paul has done to just amp up the girth of how, why, when to sell, and just this ecosystem he's created. It just makes me so proud, but it's also a lot of his innovation and some of the things that he's taken from the work that he did within our group, but he's just taken it to a whole other level. And then another graduate has gone on to what's called the TELUS International, now renamed TELUS Digital outfit. And he's out there doing things right across the globe with clients from Google to Uber, et cetera, and helping them with the development of their people in this outfit that is a revenue generating outfit. So two really good examples with Paul and Brian. One's internal to TELUS with the account execs and one with global clients right across the planet.
But let me wind you back then, right? So at what point did you go, this culture thing, this is what it's all about? And when you say you help people with struggling cultures, what's a struggling culture?
Well, we're going to go way, way back here, Dom. So I guess it's the English in me, or at least the English blood in me. I had some football skill when I was a wee lad growing up in Canada when my parents rooted outside of Toronto. And so I was at a camp for the Canadian national team ecosystem. And we were there for a training camp, and there was about 30 of us or so young lads, and we're all in preparation for at the time, the only way Canada was going to be in anything that was a World Cup was if we hosted something. So this is in the mid 80s, and we were hosting the under 17 World Cup.
Right.
So automatic berth, as you know. And so we got to put this great squad together. So I mean, I didn't have two left feet, but I was okay. And so I'm in this group of lads who are in the final training camp. And interestingly, the Soccer Association was put together by a whole bunch of Brits, but that's another story for another day. In the final session, we're all taken into this auditorium. And this is when they announce who's made the squads. We're all sitting in the auditorium, and the managers, the coaches, they come on stage, a microphone, and they each call out each name of the player. So, for example, some listeners and viewers might remember the name Paul Pesci-Salido. So, Fulham player, Canadian, did well in England, married the owner. And anyway, so he's called up. He makes the squad for obvious reasons. He's Pesh. My name's not called. But this is the culture point. This is when I'm 15 or 16 when I realize I need to do something about this. The manager is at the microphone there and says, well, better luck next time, lads, and walks off the stage. And all the guys that made the squad, the 18 or 20 of them, are in this special room over here. And there's like 10 of us left in an audience crying, commiserating, wondering what the F just happened to my career and life. And we're just boys. And so I get up out of the auditorium and I start literally packed my bag in my dorm room and started walking home, which was about 3 hours away.
Yeah.
And somehow, with an age of no mobile phones, about an hour into that trip, my dad finds me on the side of the road on the highway in the station wagon and picks me up and like gets in. It says, get in. And he said, well, what are you doing? I was like, I never want to see that man ever again. That man basically ripped my heart out. And so, Dom, that seed was planted that day where I decided that I was never going to be treated that way. But I also planted a seed unknowingly, to be honest, because I'm only 16 at the time. How I think cultures and organizations, right, can do better in the way in which that we treat one another. So, long-winded answer for a very short question.
And if you look back now, knowing what you know, why was it done so badly, do you reckon?
Well, not only was it done badly, but that's sort of the point, is that it continues to be done badly. The to be done part is leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, we lack still to this day, and I just don't understand why, very core skills like emotional intelligence. Like we're humans, aren't we? I mean, I bleed, you bleed, it's red. Doesn't matter what color you are or what identity you are or what your sexuality is or lack thereof one. Like, I don't care. We bleed red. So we're human. We have emotions. We bring things from life into work. And when work things are happening to us, we'll probably bring them into our lives. So could we not just start remembering that the word human is inhumane, and we just start with some EQ, just bottom line civility and kindness? I think back to the mid 80s when I was left crying in a wooden seat in an auditorium 3 hours outside of Toronto, and then walking home profusely crying now because I didn't really know where I was going. I was like, why can't we just be a little more humane, Dom? Let's start there. Hey,
I was chatting to somebody earlier today, and he said he'd written a book about management, how to suck less at being a manager, and he said, I don't even know why I needed to write this book. Like, there's nothing really that new in it. It's just we keep promoting people for the wrong reasons to be managers. So, your head of the Canadian football squad probably gets the job because he's got some knowledge of football, not because he has any EQ. And that still, I work with clients all the time. Like, why is Fred the head of sales? Well, he was the first salesperson. So, when he'd been around a little while, he ended up being head of sales. Yeah. It happens all the time. It happens every day.
I'm flabbergasted when I repeatedly receive emails or DMs, people wanting to know why their organization or their boss or both are the way they are. And it invariably comes down to these kind of like, let me take a step back. So a professor, a doctor at UPenn many, many years ago did an experiment with dogs. His name was Marty Seligman. And the dog's experiment was called learned helplessness. That was really the theory. Yeah. So basically, he regrets having done it, but he put a dog in a room, open up a door, there would be food that would be sort of looking there on a plate on the other side of the door. Dog would go over and the door would shut, so the dog couldn't eat. And then they put another dog in the room the next day, and the same thing would happen. Both dogs would now go over, thing shuts, they can't eat. Third day, another dog is entered in there. Now, the first dog is kind of looking like, I'm on to this. It's not going to be there. And so dogs 2 and 3 go over like, and then the door shuts. And so now day 4, fourth dog, right? Now you've got basically dogs 1 and 2, the door pops up and dogs 1 and 2 are like, that's not happening. Dog 3 looks at dog 1 and 2 and says, ooh, I guess I'm probably with you now. And dog 4 doesn't even go over to the door, looks at the other 3 and says, oh, I'm following those dudes. And that's learned helplessness. So my point, terrible experiment, but the learned helplessness inside our organizations is kind of where I'm going. Is that we've learned to be non-EQ, non-emotionally intelligent, ruthless, rigid, uncollaborative, watch me bounce off my chest, how awesome and important I am, rhetoric. Yet people just want to live a good life, live a good work life, and just be treated like kindly, humanely. Not everyone wants to climb the ladder and make gazillions of dollars. They just want a sense of purpose and meaning. Like, that's what I find.
It's interesting because why does he regret doing the study? Because it's cruel to be nasty to dogs.
Yeah, it was the cruelty to animals.
Yeah. Well, even if he didn't regret it, he has to say he regrets it. Otherwise, people would judge him. But there is similar evidence from the Czech Republic Polish border. So when the Iron Curtain came down, they put up electric fence, and it went through the middle of a forest, and there's a herd of red deer gets split down the middle. And obviously at the beginning, the deer would get electrocuted. But now here we are 30 years later, multiple generations of deer since the fence has been there, and they put trackers on them, and the deer don't go over where the fence, there's no reason at all other than habit, learned behavior, learned helplessness. We don't go over this imaginary line in the ground because, well, we just don't. But it affects businesses of all shapes and sizes. I used to work with a guy who said in his company, unless you put 22 in the top right-hand box of your expense form claim, finance wouldn't pay it. But nobody in finance knew why you had to put 22 in the box. Like it's just a thing that you had to do. And you just, and because if you turn up in a company and you're the type of person who says, well, why do we have to do that? Like, even at school, you get told to be quiet and stand in the corner and put a blackboard duster behind, between your nose and the wall. We work really hard to beat out that curiosity out of our populations.
I believe it's the oldest running sitcom, if not cartoon or comedy show, but of course it's The Simpsons. And the opening, everyone's somewhere around the way has seen a Simpsons episode. The opening of the Simpsons episode has not changed in 30 years, except for the final 2 seconds, 3 seconds, which is Bart writing something on the board, which is because he's kind of in detention for something that he's done. It's like Bart exemplifies curiosity. He exemplifies the flipped classroom. He exemplifies being having the need to be nurtured, but also unleashed at the same time. And I think that's like metaphorically where leaders get it wrong. We're putting employees in detention, but we're not nurturing. And I think that's where we need to be cognizant in this day and age where people are desperately in need of curbing their loneliness, their boredom, their stress, their anxiety, the lack of relationships, plummeting birth rates. It's just like it is all over. Yet, what do? We still use antiquated command and control, 1939 to 46 kind of militaristic views on how we should lead. There's no thriving there. There's no nurturing. It is thou shalt militaristically do. Otherwise, you'll have lines on the chalkboard like Bart Simpson.
But not everywhere.
No, there's hope.
My friend Henry Stewart wrote a book called The Happiness Manifesto. And, his view is that everybody should work in a happy workplace. I suppose I take a slightly different view when I was running companies going, but I don't want everyone to, because this is my competitive advantage, right? It'd be lovely if everyone was great, but actually I'll just focus on being great because then I can attract and retain top talent. I'm not on a mission to change the world. I'm just on a mission to change this company. So...
Well, I mean, I know where your MO lies there, Dom, but I get it. I mean, you're looking at it from the entrepreneurial revenue, EBITDA, profitability perspective. So if everyone is great, then none of us are great.
I'll have to find someone else to do. And, I've been doing this for 30 years. Don't make me change now. It's worked so far. When you went to TELUS, what was it that you fixed? Like, you look back over your time there. How did you change the culture? What was broken? What did you fix? How did you fix it?
Well, it certainly wasn't just me, but I was hired to come in to basically, quote, shake it up. And when I say shake it was, a pretty stoic, careful, certainly siloed culture of, 35 odd thousand people. And so a few things that we did were the sort of a look, listen, and learn tour. Like, what is this culture? Like kind of the first 6 months or so in 2008, 2009. And worked along with a whole bunch of different stakeholders in the fall of 2009 to launch something we call the TLP, the TELUS Leadership Philosophy. Not a program, not a model, but like a philosophy. And when you think about it, I'm so glad that we stuck with the term philosophy because it's like parameters of how we should operate. So here are not just values and attributes, but the actual operating conduct processes. So how do we have fair process? How do we sort of do talent progression and succession planning? What platforms will we collaborate on? And why will we not have splinter platforms everywhere? Because we want a community of both strong and weak tides, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole philosophy was we're stronger together, united by our logo and values and behaviors and culture. We have a social purpose. We're not just here for EBITDA and shareholder return, although important, are outcomes of how we treat our customers and ourselves. And I think that was pretty successful, quite honestly, as measures of like just looking at, we use Aon Hewitt for engagement or employee engagement. And it went from 51% to 87% in a 5-year period. And, you kind of look at some of the data like that, like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you look at shareholder return and you look at customer sat and you look at other factors like actual financial metrics. And you're like, oh, it actually kind of worked. We introduced the world's first ever corporate MBA called the TELUS MBA. And it's not that we built it, although we worked with our partner, University of Victoria. And so I still run it to this day. I'm on retainer. And it is the way in which that we can handpick people who apply, first of all, handpick those people who apply to be part of a 2-year MBA run in partnership with the University of Victoria in British Columbia, Canada. And we sculpt the curricula. The final capstone projects are all projects that keep the organization up at night, or they're opportunities to be creative and and fluid with our thinking. And they have launched things like an entire business unit, TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods. They've launched virtual veterinarian pet care for owners of pets. It's launched an esports affiliate program. Like, you just kind of name it, and these revenue opportunities or cost curbing exercises have been quite influential. Anyway, those are the types of things that we did and are still doing, and it's for me, it's a very proud chapter in my life.
35,000 people, is that what you said?
35,000 people in Canada, and now I think it's 120,000 with all the different international properties all up under the TELUS logo.
You've got lots of cultures there. I mean, if the business hadn't been deliberate about it before, it would have been all over the place. How did you narrow down something?
It goes back to that TLP, that philosophy. So how is it that regardless of where you are, what unit you might be in, what your tenure is, if you're a 40-year lifer or a 4-day-old employee that just got hired, like, what do we stand for? Mm-hmm. What's the philosophy of how we lead ourselves as individuals? Because not everyone is, quote, a leader of people. But then if you are elevated to a role of leader, what is the common currency? What's the leadership operating system that we're all going to speak from? If, one organization is on Unix, one organization's on Macs, and one organization's on PCs, it's very difficult to have a very similar operating system conversation. But if you start root down to, that's sort of like a Beastie Boys rap there. But if you root down to basically the core of what it is that we need to be consistent with, I think that's that cultural operating system, and the idea of having a leadership philosophy can ground people in what it is that we all identify on.
So is that still true across the 100,000? That philosophy still true over?
I mean, given I'm on retainer, it's great to see that I'm still slightly plugged in. It's sort of two of my 10 toes. So I do get coverage in that sense. And I do, with the opportunity then to reflect back on sort of where it was back in 2007, 8, 9 to where it is today. I'm so glad that the CEO and the senior leadership team made those bets long ago on what type of culture we want to be. And that's really, in my opinion, right, carried through the years.
How many CEOs have you worked with?
One.
So there's something about that, isn't there? There's something about, because that's not a short-term fix. That's somebody with a long-term plan. It's like planting a tree so that we can have a sandwich underneath it 40 years from now.
Diametrically opposed to that might be like the recent examples of Starbucks.
Yeah.
So, Starbucks have had 3 iterations of Howard Schultz. And then within the last 24 months, including Schultz, they've had 3 CEOs. And I think they're going through a bit of an identity crisis. Like, well, what do we stand for? What is Starbucks? What is the kiosk or the shop culture? Is it that third place, which was one of Schultz's things? And I think what you're seeing in hindsight is some confusion, not just in the market, but if you, and I do, talk to a few people inside of Starbucks, they're like, yeah, we're not quite sure how it's all supposed to be these days. So it's not that Starbucks has gone bad. It's that I think there's an example where if CEOs come and go and you've got sort of the teeter-totter example of leadership here or leadership here, what's our culture, you get confusion within the organizational ranks, and then you might have competing philosophies or certainly competing cultures that's not systemically unified to the quote one.
Yes, and if you were championing the consumer at the beginning and then all of a sudden you start championing profitability or something else. I'm just thinking about, Wells Fargo, whenever something goes wrong, there's that, they focus the entire organization on something, which is, a narrow metric, which is not a philosophy, not a social good, trying to drive some short-term gain. And then they act surprised when people game the system, which they will always do.
Like, well, Wells Fargo is such another interesting example because there you have, in my opinion, right, from the research I've done in that organization, is a lack of true social purpose and identity. They don't really know what they stand for. Like financial institutions can stand for more than just making money. And often they do. Take a look at some of the credit unions in this world. They're there to serve community and the stakeholders, not shareholders, the stakeholders that comprise up of their customer base. So there's like great examples in like the Midwest of America or in the prairies of Canada, where that community-based credit union is there to serve the farmers of that geographic region. And they're there, yes, to take care of their financial interest, but they're there to serve the community first and foremost. When you have a Wells Fargo, where do you start? With the fake accounts that were opened a couple of years ago, and unbeknownst to customers that they were being charged monies in their actual bank accounts that they didn't know they actually opened. And then the leaders who concocted the idea either sort of, decried, oh no, that wasn't us, and get made off with millions of dollars in exit packages. Or is it recently an organization that had an employee that actually died at their desk and people didn't know and didn't find her for 4 days? Like they're just like walking by with a poor lady who had passed. What kind of culture is that?
Yes. It's hysterical. And how do you fix it then? Like, how do you break the cycle so that managers without EQ people without EQ don't become managers? We take us back to the beginning of the conversation. So you've ended up with CEOs and they don't have enough EQ.
Dom, I do believe that not just the CEO, but a senior leadership team has to believe that, and this may be a Canadian metaphor, that they are in the same canoe and that they must be paddling in the same direction. And so what does that canoe stand for? What does that canoe want to be known for as it's going through the choppy waters? And if that canoe is not unified, and you've got people either sort of with their paddles out, and they're like this, so like, I'm not going to paddle. Or the others are actually turned the other way and they're paddling the other way and they're like causing friction. Like, we're not going anywhere. Well, duh, because there's 10 of you in the boat and 3 of you are paddling that way, 3 of you are paddling that way, and 4 of you are in the middle, not paddling. No one's going anywhere. And that's a boat in crisis. It's just going to sit there. And I think metaphorically, when you think about it from like senior leadership teams, if they're not aligned on what social purpose is, what they stand for, how they're going to engage their employees and team members, so they treat them not like numbers in a box on a spreadsheet, but actual human beings who have lives and they have issues, but they just want to do good work. When we start there with that philosophy of what our leadership and our culture ought to be, I think that's the canoe metaphor where I just wish, honestly, Dom, I wish and wish and wish more and more and more that senior leaders saw that forest through the trees, now to mix metaphors, and stop thinking solely about themselves and thus their paychecks, their girth, and the shareholders that supposedly deserve dividends and buybacks.
I think the way I see it often is when they get to that, before they're in the canoe, their entire lives are getting promoted because of the thing they already knew. And they never get to ask people questions to which they don't know the answer. And collaboration is not high on the list because, you're a sales manager. You're not collaborating really with the other managers. You've got your team, and then you're a sales director, and you're on the C-suite. Now your core skill is collaboration, and you've been promoted all the way through your career, and never once until you get to the top is collaboration a thing. And it's just it's fascinating. So it's not surprising that people are in, because it's the EQ thing, but there's not a lot of constructive conflict. So I disagree with you, but I don't tell you I disagree with you. I don't like your idea, but I don't tell you I don't like your idea. I just nod and go out the room and tell people you're an idiot. But I don't actually try and fix it.
That goes back to, do I feel safe Do I feel that I belong? And when I belong, I feel safe to say the unspoken truths. And that might be just in a meeting about where we're heading in this project plan or this code review, or, where the customer sat feedback came in from the week. If I don't feel safe and I don't feel like I belong inside of that team or whatever, that passive aggressiveness will continue. That silent saboteur will continue. And how is that healthy for the growth and the innovation of the organization or the team? It's not. That to me is kind of where we lose sight on what we're there for. I mean, it's so overused, but when a leader thinks that they're the smartest in the room, frankly speaking, I say they're in the wrong room. In fact, they should get the hell out. The whole point of leadership is to nurture and inculcate a culture in which that nurturing of the team makes you smarter and creates a better outcome because you've tapped into the intellect and wisdom and the collective intelligence of those people within the room. I don't know why still to this day, like there's far too many leaders who believe that, well, it's my way, isn't it? And maybe that's part of that learned helplessness point that you're sort of alluding to there.
You would think that the market would correct. Because, you're saying, look, here we've got a fantastic CEO at TELUS. Let's look at their longevity, their financial performance, their customer sat, their profitability. And therefore, if we're looking to hire somebody, we should look at that. And instead, they hire somebody who looks like everybody else.
Let's go to another example, right? So Microsoft has had 3 CEOs in its long tenure of now about 50 years or so, right? Just approaching 50 years. So Bill Gates, genius, probably a terrible leader, but genius nonetheless, got the company going, right? Steve Ballmer, I don't even know how to describe that individual, at least from firsthand.
You say it, and what you have in your head is him yelling on stage. He must not have yelled all of the time he was there. No, he didn't. But in your mind, you've just
exactly. And I know some people that worked for him, with him, around him. Like he wasn't always the guy on stage crazy, but aggressive.
Yes.
And sometimes making decisions like Nokia, for example, and a few others that just were like the Windows Phone, right? And it's like, that's just weird. But in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, when they promoted Satya Nadella, one of the first things he said was that we need to shift the organizational culture from a bunch of know-it-alls to a bunch of learn-it-alls. And I thought that was just so telling about what even though he had been at the company for 20 odd years prior to that, what he knew they had to do was to shift away from the siloed, account executive. I know everything. I don't need anyone to help me sell stuff. I'm the code genius. I don't need anyone else to kind of review my code, to the humble, vulnerable, empathic individual and leader who says, you know what? I don't know it, but I'd like to learn it. So how do we become a learn-it-all as opposed to a know-it-all? That I thought was just profound. And now you look at the innovation at Microsoft, you look at where they are customer sat-wise, you look at from their EBITDA, you look at from their shareholder return, you look at from their market cap, all of it. The outcomes that you would look for in an organization that financially and et cetera you'd look for are all there. But it took like 3 or 4 years for the culture train to shift, so that you could see some of these positive outcomes take place.
Well, and it's interesting because I was sort of, the companies that I've been in have been in the sort of Microsoft orbit. And so under Ballmer, I would see people that they were hiring and I'd go, they're not very good people. And they've gone to Microsoft. And then later on, it was like, oh, they're smart people. They've gone to, and you could sense this change in the quality of the types of people that they were hiring. And I remember then going to some events in the US and going, this company feels like it's cool again. Because for a while it wasn't very cool. It was huge, but cool. It wasn't cool.
It's uncool. I mean, very uncool. And just to finish up the point on Satya, I would say one of the other things that he did was he said the number one job of a leader is twofold, is to develop their team and to provide air cover. And I just love that term, air cover. So like the number one job of a leader, develop them. And then when they need the air cover for you to support them when things go wrong or something's gone awry or whatever, some deadline's been missed, you're there to stick up for them and to show them maybe why, but also prevent them from feeling fear, psychologically unsafe, fill in the blanks.
Yeah. Look, you've written, we haven't talked about any of your books, Dan.
It's fine.
So people might be interested in what you've written. So, five books. What? Quick. Have you got a sentence on each so that people could go, right, I like that Dan guy. I thought that was cool. I'll go and get that book.
Flat Army, all about collaborative cultures. The Purpose Effect. There's 3 types of purpose. They all intersect in a Venn diagram: personal, organizational, and role. Open to Think. There's 3 types of thinking, which I call dream, decide, do. You apply your thinking, but before that, you have to have creative and critical thinking. Lead, Care, Win. Basically the empathy book. So what are the habits for you to be an empathic and caring leader? And Work-Life Bloom. There's no such thing as work-life balance or employee engagement, but we might bloom in our work and our lives, but that's only about 30% of the time. 70% of the time, we're not blooming, and that's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. Basically, Dom, you, me, everyone listening, watching, anyone on this planet of 8 billion, we will have ups and downs in work and life. And there are times when the up of work and life intersect, and that's great. But about 70% of the time, at least in my research, 67% specifically, we will be in other personas than blooming. We might be stunted because work sucks, but life's going well. We might be budding. Budding is when work's going well, but life is sort of like, I need a little bit of help on a few factors. Or when renewal, when both work and life are in the loo.
Right.
And when that's happening, it's not terrible. It's that things are just not great in both. So there's some renewing to do in both.
Let me ask you this. There's some research I saw from McKinsey, and it was a longitudinal study, and it looks at productivity. If you can be in flow at work, you are 500% more productive, 5x more productive than somebody who's just grinding. Yeah. And then I look at, people said, oh, I've burnt out. And I think I can't conceive, if you think about hobby is something that puts you in flow, puts you in an alpha state that you don't get paid to do. People don't say, oh God, I'm a fly fisherman, but I'm so burnt out of fly fishing. Or, they don't say, I'm a runner, but the running's just burnt me out, right? So when people say, oh, I'm burnt out, I just think it might be that you are not in the right job, or maybe that, work sucks. But then still, you might just not get any joy from the work that for whatever reason you've decided to do. You might be stuck there.
Or you might be on a downdraft on that particular segment of your role. So, roles can have ups and downs. There might be a project that's a 9-month project, a rollout of some big platform, let's just say, right? And you're like, this is amazing. And then it all rolls out and everyone goes to the pub. They have great pints. Off they go into Soho and they're loving their day and their weekend. And then Monday it's like, oh, Jesus, what? We have to do this now? And whatever this isn't as exhilarating as what happened for the previous 9 months, but you're in the same role.
Yeah, or it goes horribly wrong, and you're just having to grind for a while.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So back to like flow and versus kind of friction. When you're in flow, it's just again, it's kind of like blooming. It's like everything's swimmingly going well, and there's these beautiful bouquets and breezes that are warm, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold. You're just like, my tomatoes are blooming, and it's just like, I'm floating, but. Yeah, it ends. Like, spoiler alert, I'm 53 times around the sun, and I have seen myself bloom on numerous occasions, but we don't always bloom. And if we can get past the fact that we need to balance work and life all the time, yes, you will be balanced on occasion, but there's lots of times where it's not. Or when we think about employee engagement, when these organizations believe that they need to stay at like 90% engagement all the time, like, come on, that's not how it works. Life has its ebbs and flows. So do we. Like, let's talk about an acquisition just briefly. Your company was acquired. So your company of 2,000 people was acquired by a company of 25,000 people. Everything was going well until the Monday morning email that said, "Isn't it great that XYZ bought us? Everyone's gonna be taken care of. Don't you worry." And what's the first thing that goes through 2,000 people's minds? Like, oh my God, do I have a job? Oh my God. And then, after the acquisition plays out and now we're into post-acquisition implementation mode and it's 6 months later, the people are like, I just got Dom as a boss. Dom is a dick. I can't believe that I am here now with Dom as my boss. And look at these people around my team now, Sally and Sajinder. And I've got, who's that? And then they just changed my email platform from Outlook to Google. Like, I don't even understand how to use Google. Like, so now you're 6 months after the announcement on that Monday, and you've got all these different changes. Are you telling me that from the Friday before the acquisition, when you were blooming, that you're blooming 6 months later?
Man, no. It's miserable. It's miserable. I've been in that job. This bloke with a long job title and no ability turns up and starts telling you to do shit that's just completely ridiculous. And you're like, right, okay, I'm going to leave now. See ya. I've done that a few times.
It happens to many of us, Dom, you and me included. And this is why the reality is we need a real lens for what is the reality of work and life. It's not always going to be rosy, and that's okay. You got to find ways for yourself individually to strategize out of that. Plus, if you're in an organization and you kind of have some hope, how do you work with your leader, or you as the leader, how do you work within the construct to sort of make it less sucky and ideally with the opportunity to bloom a little more downstream?
Fab. So other than your books, what's on your list? What do you recommend people read?
I'm just about finished this apocalyptic demographer from the US. His name is Peter Zeihan. Yeah. And Peter Zeihan's latest, who I always get into, is the end of the world is just the beginning. And he has got some serious demographic, oh my God moments throughout that book. He goes kind of into the history of it, but also bringing up to real day on the fertility rate and birth rate issues, the longevity issues, just a bunch of things there that has opened my mind to my next work that I'm working on. So Peter Zeihan's book's been very, very helpful in a collapsing of civilization way.
Oh, yeah, except my memory is the US will be okay and the rest of the world is buggered.
Yeah, and Canada is the living in the attic upon the crack house is actually in better shape than others as well. Yeah.
What else you got? What else have you read recently you thought was great?
Another one sort of that I got into was Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks is sort of a post-French horn concerto player who's turned into a PhD on the development of the soul, I might call it. So his book's called From Strength to Strength. And he's looking at this longevity piece as well about what we as individuals who are living longer might be doing to fuel both work, life, purpose, meaning, etc. in kind of your post 60s up until like the ages of centenarian. So it's a really good read as well.
I like that. I thought he said he looks back at the work he did in his 30s and he doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm not as smart as I was when I was 30 from that perspective, but gets joy from coaching and training and, impacting others. And so it's that I quite like the arc of his life and thinking about, where do you get joy and happiness and how that might change over your lifetime as well. So it was really good.
Big fan of Brooks. Big fan of Brooks. His writing anywhere, The Atlantic, his books. But From Strength to Strength, one I recommend.
Fab. I've got some quick fire questions. You ready?
Rock and roll.
Okay. What drives you every day?
A Ford Mach-E.
Do you know what? As I asked it, I was thinking to myself, somebody's going to give me the name of a car. And then you did. What's your genius?
My wife.
Ha! That's good. What does she think your genius is?
Herself. No, that's a joke, Denise. It's just a joke. I am an autodidact. I am relentlessly dissatisfied with the status quo and curious beyond belief to her detriment. And she warns me I need to table it, top it, pop it down, stop thinking. But that's me.
Okay. What unpopular opinion do you hold?
That the world is flat. No, it's terrible. All the flat lovers are like, yeah, Dan, way to go. I think right now, in current day, the DEI argument is going to rue the day sooner rather than later. I think we need to be very careful about what's happening with DEI.
Okay. But when you said flat earth, I was taken back to our earlier conversation. And it's almost, when you challenge people who are saying, why would managers need EQ? And like, why can't we have command and control? It's as if you're suggesting to them the earth isn't flat, and they'll lock you up for heresy.
Yes, indeed.
What's the most significant risk you've taken?
Probably having a third child. But Kate, I love you. I would say, that's a joke, by the way. I would say deciding to leave a full-time gig with no real plan on how to be a company of one.
Yeah. You happy?
Oh, I am now, but I wasn't. I had no idea what I was doing.
Knitting your own parachute on the way down.
Yes, quickly. Yeah.
How do you measure success?
If I have my purpose enacted as often as I can. So I have this declaration of purpose, Dom. We're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through. If I feel I am contributing to that, helping people see it through, whatever that may be, as often as I can, and I feel that reciprocity from their feedback to me, then, it's a pretty good day, week, or month.
Okay. What's the last thing you've learned or skill you've acquired?
I'd say my good skill, I would say the ukulele. Yeah, just challenge myself. It's a 4-string mini guitar. And G, C, D, and F, they're pretty good chords and easy ones to play.
Did you already play another instrument?
I learned to play piano by ear, if that sounds too pretentious. I'm sorry, but
no, that sounds good.
Now I can play 4 pretty good chords.
Fab. Biggest source of inspiration?
I think team members.
Yeah.
The feedback I get and just being able to sit in audiences or organizations and listen to what is bugging them and what's making them tick. I just love listening to people's stories.
Fab. And last one, what's the biggest myth in business?
Shareholder primacy theory, which is that the only reason an organization exists is to give back wealth to its shareholders. Good God, could we move on, Dom?
Very good. Very good. Dan, it's been an absolutely pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and giving us your time.
You're a great extemporaneous host and chatterer yourself. Thank you so much, Dom.